Story 1. The Craft Store Ghost. About 11 years ago, my mother worked in a small-town craft store that was owned by my aunt. The shop had once been someone's home, but that had been at least 40 years ago or more. I used to hang out at the store after school. It was my job at closing time to shut off all the lights, make sure all the doors were locked, while my mother tallied up the sales for the day. It was always a pain finding the light switches in the 7 cramped rooms, because the light switches were in some strange places, often behind things. I made it a game every night to find them. One night when we was closing up, I was in one of the rooms, reaching for the light switch, when it clicked itself off. I thought it was strange, so I tried to turn it on again. But before I could reach it, it clicked itself back on. Figuring that my mother was shutting it off some other way, I called out to her that it wasn't fair to click the light off on me. As I said that, the switch clicked itself off. Completely unnerved, I ran back to the main room and told my mother what was happening. She laughed and said that lighting in old houses can be very strange. I knew about the faulty wiring in old houses, but that didn't account for the switch itself moving. As we were leaving, we did a quick walkthrough, as we did every single night, to make sure things were ready for the morning. It was then that we noticed the lights were on in the same room in which I'd had my scare. My mother scolded me for leaving the lights on. As soon as she finished scolding me, the light clicked itself off. Feeling particularly brave, I yelled out something to the effect of, "Stop that!" And to our amazement, the light switch started clicking on and off rapidly, but finally stayed on. We quickly moved to click the light off again, and we left the building as quickly as possible, thinking that this was strange. We mentioned it to my aunt the next day. She said she wasn't surprised. Often as she is closing, the string of sleigh bells on the main door would jingle like someone was coming in. But when she looked up, the door had not and was not moving. She'd had other strange things happen as well. Before this, my cousins and I were often told to occupy ourselves in the storage room, as we had a habit of getting underfoot. Theoretically, this was an ideal place for us. It had a fridge, a table, a TV, and a ton of cool junk to look at. It was strange that we always had a feeling that we were not alone in there. The room had a kind of unhappy feeling that we could never quite explain. I remember that my cousins and I avoided that room at all cost. We kind of figured it was just our imaginations, until my aunt and mother admitted much later that they too never felt comfortable in that room. To this day, I still don't know why all those strange things occurred. My aunt sold the business about 8 years ago, and since then, it has been the home to at least 3 other businesses. She told us several years later that the legend had it that a woman had once lived in the house and had hung herself in the back room. But as I said, it's probably not true. It's just a town legend. But it would certainly explain a lot if that was true. Story 2. The Ghostly Wreck. It was about 5 years ago. My then boyfriend and I were in my native East Tennessee to visit a friend from college. We were out for a drive one evening about dusk. We were on a 2-lane secondary road that had been widened recently to a 4-lane due to the extreme growth. We approached a blind curve that separates 2 hills with a dip into a valley. As we got to the top of the first hill, we saw what appeared to be a very bad wreck, complete with police cruisers blocking the road, their lights on, ambulances, tow trucks, the works. Since this looked like a pretty bad wreck and the road was blocked in front of us, we decided to turn around in the parking lot of an apartment complex and take another route. When we came back to the entrance of the apartment complex, where we had just turned around, the wreck was gone, completely. Not so much as a policeman writing a report or a tow truck driving away. Mind you, it took us 45 seconds to turn around in that apartment complex parking lot. There was no way, based on the severity of the wreck we saw, that it could have been cleared that quickly. We even drove down into that area where we saw the wreck. No skid marks, no glass, nothing. I know what we saw. There was 3 of us in the car. We all saw it. We had even discussed waiting for it to clear or turning around. We were all sane. No drugs, no alcohol. We saw the wreck, and then it was just gone. Story 3. Ghost sighting? While on patrol in the late 1980s, I was dispatched to a suspicious person on the east end of a bridge in our town. I approached from the west. Just as I was about to come off the bridge, I noticed a woman sitting on the south rail in her nightgown. When I looked in the rearview mirror, she was miraculously on the other side. Believing the woman to be intoxicated, I turned the car around and approached slowly from around the curve. When I got to where the woman was, she was gone. Had she jumped? Not likely, but I checked anyway. I was already out of the car, peering over the north rail with the spotlight, when I noticed the woman standing in the yard of a house located on the northeast side of the approach. A faint glow seemed to surround her. When I directed my spotlight towards her, she disappeared in the light. It wasn't until a couple years later that another police officer mentioned that other strange things were happening in that locale. Almost all of the sightings were of a woman, seen in the upper rooms of that house, but never outside. I always told my story in amusement. I'm still quite skeptical. Some dismiss the happenings as squirrels reflecting in headlights, or some dismiss them as chance. And others, like myself, explain them as my mind was just playing tricks on me. But who knows? Story 4. My strange experiences. Here are a few instances that happened to me over the years. A couple are related. The first happened in the late 80s. I was driving in my car with a friend. It was around 10 o'clock at night, and we were bored, so we were just driving around aimlessly. We were in a residential area, not far from farmland, nearing a crossroad. All of a sudden, the atmosphere in the car changes. It feels thick. Our hearing also changes. It becomes muffled. I looked at my friend to see if he was noticing anything. His eyes were wide open. He looked pale and scared. I looked ahead. Under a street lamp, there was a small black figure, about 4 foot tall, wearing a full-length cloak. I noticed that when it walked under a lamp, there was no shadow, no highlights, no lowlights. It was as if it absorbed the light as it walked under it. I again looked at my friend and asked if he saw this too. His mouth was open, but all he could do was shake his head. I asked him what I should do. Should I slow down? Should I speed up? Should I turn around? I really felt odd at the time. I watched the figure cross the street diagonally in front of us, and then turn the head of the cloak towards us. It seemed to be startled. It walked faster. I got the feeling that it realized that we saw it, and that we were not supposed to see it. It crossed between two cars, through a fence, but not at an actual gate. The actual fence it crossed through. And then it disappeared. I took my foot off the gas pedal because I'd run out of time to turn around. But the car wasn't really slowing down as much as I thought it should. When we passed the area that it disappeared, the atmosphere changed back to normal. Our hearing came back. I stomped on the gas and we were out of there. The next day we came back to the same area in daylight to look for the gate that he must have walked through. There was no gate in the area. The next two incidents are somewhat related. I was living in an apartment in Virginia. I was asleep and I heard a voice in my head that there was someone in the room watching me and I needed to wake up. The voice sounded urgent. I felt like I was swimming against a current trying to wake up. When I was able to open my eyes, there was a form of a woman standing in the room. She was wearing an all-white dress. She had very light blonde hair and pale, pale skin. She also had on dark sunglasses. She was standing very close to my face, looking at me. I blinked several times to see if I was dreaming, but she was still there. I didn't have a good or bad feeling about her. She was just there. Eventually, she moved backwards into a wall and disappeared. About 6 months later, I heard that same urgent voice in my head. Had the same swimming sensation when I woke up. And there the figure was again. This time she was holding something that looked like a window screen. I blinked my eyes again, just like last time. And I noticed that it wasn't the woman from last time. It was a male. But he had the same blonde hair, in a similar cut. He lowered the screen slowly and smiled at me. In that smile that people have when they get caught doing something they shouldn't. He moved backwards into the wall, just like she did, and disappeared. I've not experienced them at all since then. But I did move out shortly after the second incident. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed the stories. If you did, give me a thumbs up, hit that subscribe button, and drop me a comment below. I love hearing from you. Bye!